It's round 5 here at Grand Prix Detroit. TJ Rogers joined by Jake Van Lunen, and we are seeing the battle between Luis Scott-Vargas and Matt Nass. Now, Luis Scott-Vargas, we actually saw really early in this tournament playing Jeskai Control. Now, this is a little bit different than the blue-white control that has been everywhere. And his opponent, Matt Nass, moving away from Markland Ironworks and really picking up the new artifact deck on the block, this Hardened Scales Affinity. And turn 1, it's going to be Darksteel Citadel, Mox Opal, Welding Jar into Hangerback Walker.
Yeah, a nice start there for Matt Nass, putting 4 cards onto the table right away, really just creating this very wide board.
Yeah, and one thing is, Luis Scott-Vargas, he's got Lightning Helix and Lightning Bolt as removal spells, but they are much less effective than the Exile spells against a deck like this one with Hangerback Walkers available.
And that's definitely a consideration that Matt Nass took into account when he was building this deck. He thought that some of the blue-white players might be moving into this shell that's also playing red, and recognizing that this deck tends to do much better against those versions of the deck. This deck has really impressed me over the last week and a half. I think it is one of the premier aggressive strategies of Modern. The deck is very difficult to play, but if there's anybody who can play a combo creature strategy, it's Matt Nass. Talking about somebody who may play combo elf decks better than anybody else in the entire world. So here he is, hard at work.
Backup Hangerback Walker. That animation module that came down to the battlefield, this is a card that you may have missed because it was in Kaladesh and it was something that really showed up in Limited until very recently. It is a 1-mana artifact that whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a permanent you control, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, you create a 1/1 colorless servo. Now that's a non-flying token, but you do make one of those. It continues to put more and more of these creatures on the battlefield. It also has the ability to pay 3 and tap it, and you can actually choose a counter on a permanent or a player, which might be relevant with these Inkmoth Nexus available in the deck, to give that permanent or player another of that counter.
Yeah, and I've seen that come up quite a bit. I actually had the final 2 points of poison dealt to me via animation module just 2 days ago.
All right, it's going to be Arcbound Ravager with 1 counter entering the battlefield. We are going to pay the additional 1 mana, and that means that we have now got this servo. That is going to be a little bit of fuel for the Ravager as well. We also do have this Welding Jar right now, which means that some of that damage-based removal, so far it has been Path to Exiles really nicely answering these Walking Ballistas, which would otherwise be really refilling the board. That's been excellent, but he has Lightning Helix in hand, and that's just not very effective against Arcbound Ravagers and Welding Jars.
Yeah, Matt Nass has a really interesting interaction that he's able to take advantage of here, which is every time you sacrifice an artifact to this Arcbound Ravager, you're able to pay 1 mana and make an additional servo, and then those servos can be sacrificed to the Arcbound Ravager so that you can make additional servos. This means that however much mana Matt Nass has available to him, he can make that many 1/1s while also putting that many counters on the Arcbound Ravager.
Because he just needs to start the cycle once with an artifact, and then he just continually recycles whatever the servo came in.
That's correct.
Nice. All right, so it's a 3/3 Arcbound Ravager, soon to be a 4/4. It looks like we are going to create a servo, eat a servo, and that is going to leave 3 of them on the battlefield. A nice ability to get aggressive as well. Living off the top of the deck, we're already empty-handed. Luis Scott-Vargas with a full grip and just wondering how he can convert those cards into an answer.
Yeah, and this is a big attack here from Matt Nass. Matt Nass now with a board that is very resistant to removal. He has one of the better combinations this deck can produce here. Doesn't have the namesake Hardened Scales in play, but is able to use this animation module to gain a very large advantage.
That's going to be another counter onto this Arcbound Ravager, and it's also beyond the 3, which is really kind of the common Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix. All of those can deal 3 damage. That Arcbound Ravager, now being up to 5, is going to be continually difficult, and it's still flanked by all of these servos.
Luis Scott-Vargas really needs some sort of wide answer, something like Settle the Wreckage if he wants to find his way back in this game, something like Supreme Verdict. But he's stuck on 3 lands, and it means that Matt Nass can continue to just go off here. And even if Luis is able to find one of those cards, he's still going to have to contend with these lands on Matt Nass's side of the table.
Yep, and one thing to note is he does have Settle the Wreckage in hand. He does not have that 4th mana, so this is just going to be a Blinkmoth Nexus, 5 servos, and this Arcbound Ravager. This is right now an attack in, yep, for lethal. That's going to do it. LSV is going to pick up his hand. Really, he's got to feel like that was kind of a non-starter of a game for him. 2 Path to Exiles is about what his log shows for what he did in that game.
Yeah, and when you're playing against a deck like this, it really has the ability to go wide, and that spot removal is not going to match up well against an animation module draw.
All right, well, Ulamog just resolved on this battlefield that we were joining, so now it is just a Flameblade Adept against this indestructible 10/10.
Yeah, Gabby also with a Wormcoil Engine on the battlefield, one of the very best cards you can have against these Hollow 1 type of strategies.
Now's the time to do it. Can you get plus 11 or so on this Flameblade Adept? It's got Menace. The Ulamog can't block it right now. This is the one shot. This is the time. It's going to be Burning Inquiry here. How about Burning Inquiry, Burning Inquiry, Burning Inquiry. Double Cycle Street Wraiths.
Seems good.
Just like we drew it up, yeah? That seems like enough. Otherwise, we're going to start exiling quite a few cards off the top. So we've got +3/+0, and that does not look like the way that I drew it up. All right, we've got a Gurmag Angler and a land in hand for Sam Pardee, Gabby Sparts, Wormcoil Engine, Chromatic Sphere, and an Ulamog, and we're going to pick up the cards. We know that there's not much to be done. That exile ability of the Ulamog also, it gives you information.
Yeah, Sam Pardee, may not want Gabby to know all the different cards in the deck. Also recognizing that given the current game state, there's no chance of him winning.
No, not a chance. So that is going to line that one up. Looking at the top of the board, we've got Pat Cox up a game over Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa. We've got Luis Scott-Vargas falling to Matt Nass early on because he was missing that land drop. And now we have got Gabby Sparts taking game 1 up against Sam Pardee. So far a little bit balanced, but with the advantage currently on the left side of the battlefield.
Yeah, and something we see here is that Gabby has her sideboarding notes written down before the tournament. This is a really wise thing to do, especially if you're unsure of exactly what cards to bring in where and when. You don't have to use much mental capital. You know that you're going to be sideboarding the same way every single time against the same deck, and it just means that you don't have to make mistakes that it's miss sideboard or sideboard differently depending on who you're playing against. You know how you're going to sideboard every time in a particular matchup, and that can give you some level of consistency without needing to really think about it too much in between rounds and use that energy.
Yeah, the idea of preserving mental capital in a tournament that is lasting the whole weekend, 15 rounds, in an ideal world, 15 rounds, then the top 4, having the ability to just expend less of that capacity or in the early rounds or even throughout the weekend can really save you in some tight situations.
An interesting matchup here on the top. Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa, he is playing Spirits, and he's playing against Pat Cox, who's playing Humans. Now, these decks are really competing for the same space, I feel, in a team tournament like this.
Yeah, one of them, they're both kind of Noble Hierarch decks, assuming that, I believe he's on Bant Spirits, or is he on the blue-white version?
He is Bant Spirits.
Okay.
He is playing Collected Company and Path Exile, though. Or, I'm sorry, Collected Company and Ether Vial.
Now, that's actually really close to what we saw at GP Prague.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can get behind that. That same version is the version that top aided there in the hands of Andrei Strasky. And he seemed to enjoy having access to the two of them, and it looks like Paulo took his advice.
Yeah, it's an interesting deck, right? Because you have Vial, Collected Company, and you're still playing cards like Path Exile. So you can end up with a lot of draws that seem really underwhelming, but when the deck operates at maximum efficiency, it really is just the best tempo strategy you could possibly sleeve up.
So Spirits versus Humans, this has been a matchup that some people have also talked a little bit about. What are the benefits of running Spirits? And I think one point that is very commonly brought up is the idea that Spirits gives you an advantage in the Humans matchup by having access to that flying. Is that something that you would agree with, or have you experienced much of the balance between these two decks?
Yeah, so I think flying is obviously very important here. Just the ability to engineer a race that you're ahead in. However, I also think it's very important to note that the humans deck is a faster deck. And, when the humans deck is producing multiple lieutenants in particular, it becomes very difficult for Spirit's deck to get involved in a race with it.
Looks like we are going to eliminate the Thalia's lieutenant. That leaves the Noble Hierarch. Now, when that came down from Packhawks, we saw him play the Noble Hierarch, or we saw him play the Thalia's lieutenant, respond to that enter the battlefield trigger by using the Aether Vial to put in Noble Hierarch. That allowed it to be a +1/+1 counter on both creatures. That's why we saw that. Less relevant now after that Path to Exile from Palavitor Domidarosa, and he is going to be heading into his turn, untapping and drawing for the turn, and it's just a pass back. But this is a deck. The Spirits do have a lot more capacity to have flash cards, and it looks like Spell Queller is in hand.
Yeah, so Paulo kind of daring Pat to cast a creature from hand.
It'll be a 2/3 in the air. It will not have much to do against, say, an Aether Vial activation, but it can still contend with quite a bit. That Ancient Ziggurat, there's a lot of options for spending the mana for Pat Cox, and that Spell Queller is going to do its best to nullify all of that. This Meddling Mage, however, could very well be naming Spell Queller, kind of getting the read on the situation, and that would be devastating.
Yeah, and it looks like Paulo has multiple copies of Spell Queller in hand, too.
Oof. If that was the read, then this is going to be just backbreaking. Looks like it's an Aether Vial that joins the battlefield. Path to Exile eliminates that Meddling Mage. If we didn't counter that Aether Vial, I got to think that maybe that was the case. It's going to go right back here to Pat Cox. He's got 2 copies of Aether Vial as well as this Noble Hierarch. It still has got 1 counter on it. A little bit of mana. Could also attack for 2 by giving itself the boost to attack. Exalted. Even works on yourself.
Yeah.
It's a little self-congratulatory, I suppose, as far as abilities go. Spellcaller is going to jump into the fray. It's a 2/3 attacking in. It dealt its damage. Now it's a Spell Queller, and I think Pat Cox is deciding if he wants to respond to this in any way. Reflector Mage. That's going to get rid of that. It cannot be cast until after Pat Cox's next turn. Or, I'm sorry, until your next turn. So the interesting thing here is that now Palavitor can cast it again.
Yes.
Because it only cares about until your next turn, and normally that is a much larger setback. But in the case of this one, with a creature that has Flash, it's not going to do quite as much. We're attacking with a 3/4 Reflector Mage because of that Exalted from the Noble Hierarch. Aether Vial on 3, Aether Vial on 2, and 3 lands available in addition to that Noble Hierarch. There's a lot of potential to develop the board here when it comes to just options of deploying threats.
Yeah, so Pat Cox doesn't really want to cast anything into the Spell Queller, Champion of the Parish, a card that he doesn't have a Vial for 1 in play. So this is the type of card he can really cast into that. But now, if he does have an additional copy of Reflector Mage, this gives him an opportunity to put himself at a really nice advantage.
Only the Horizon Canopy remains. That Champion of the Parish should be underneath the Spell Queller. All right, so that is currently exiled. If the Spell Queller were to leave, like, say, through a Reflector Mage, as you called, that is going to give us back the Champion of the Parish, though that means that we don't get its +1/+1 counter, because now it is the last creature that entered. Reflector Mage getting it done, shining a light so bright that it just startled that ghost right away.
Yeah, normally we don't think of that as a card that's particularly strong against flash creatures, but here we are watching Reflector Mage manage quite nicely against Spell Queller, another card with the same exact casting cost.
We're going to attack on into Palavitor, and it looks like this. He had an Aether Vial in hand and didn't cast it. Collected Company it is, needs all 4 mana. We're going to take a look at the top 6 and put 2 of them into play. I think Supreme Phantom and Phantasmal Image are the only 2 options.
Yeah.
Oh my.
It was almost dangerous there. He almost only got a Phantasmal Image.
2 humans players suddenly. All right, so these Supreme Phantoms are out and about. Could be copying that one, which would make them both 2/4s now.
Yeah, could be copying the Supreme Phantom. Could also choose to copy a Reflector Mage.
Having a couple of 2/4s would mean that you can block the 2 Reflector Mages and only take 1 or 2 damage.
Or maybe double block something, but right now Paulo's life total is dangerously low.
And the danger there, I don't think he has a whole lot of options, but remember, Aether Vial on 2 and Aether Vial on 3 available. There's a lot of potential plays out of this Humans deck. Something like Athalia's Lieutenant could be just devastating. Looks like we are going to take out that Noble Hierarch.
And so the Phantasmal Image copied Reflector Mage.
So it's a 2/3 on the board. We get our own Phantasmal Image. It's going to, again, I think, copy the Reflector Mage, but because it targeted, Phantasmal Image has got that texture. It becomes a copy, except when it becomes the target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it. We do not see that Phantasmal Image returned to Paulo Vitor's hand. It is instead sacrificed. So right back into the advantage goes Pat Cox. That Collected Company now, it grabbed a Supreme Phantom.
Yeah, and still, it was the best card Paulo really could have had that turn. If he has another copy of it, it might be able to, help him get back into this. But at 4 life, he's afraid of a lot of things that might come off the top of Pat's deck.
Yep, with 4 attackers coming in 2 against only a singular blocker, likely some opportunity to produce more blockers from the Spirits deck because of the prevalence of Flash and Collected Company. But that is a lot of attackers coming in, and it's not going to take a whole lot to make one of them lethal. There's a 1-mana play. It's a Noble Hierarch that is going to go ahead and give a +1/+1 counter to the Champion of the Parish for Pat Cox. Paulo Vitor with 5 mana remaining. I'm sensing a Collected Company.
Paulo's hoping he has one. Well, now we're going to find out.
Oh, and there's the handshake. It looks like we have decided that that is enough. Maybe no Collected Company, or that was just a good way to where you have to reveal that you didn't have it. Yeah. That is going to be the win to Pat Cox. And we're looking pretty solid. So one of these matches already in the bag. Humans takes down Spirits, and now the match is remaining Matt Nass up against Luis Scott-Vargas, with Matt Nass up a game, and Sam Pardee and Gabby Sparts 1-1. So we're going to dive into this game. It is Matt Nass up against Luis Scott-Vargas, and it looks like we are already in progress. No permanents on the board for me to discuss. Based on the fact that there's so many basic forests out, I got to think that maybe a Settle the Wreckage was involved.
Yeah, things looking very good for Luis right now. It seems like Matt does not have anything in play or in hand. Luis just with a stranglehold on this game as the control player.
Yep, he does have also a Path to Exile and a Settle the Wreckage in hand. So even if things get outside of what he deems as within his control, then he would be able to actually take it down. Arcbound Worker doing its best, though. You know?
Yeah, I mean, the parts are as strong as the whole.
It's got Modular 1. That's good flavor text.
Yeah, I mean, this card can be very powerful when it's used in conjunction with things like Arcbound Ravager, as we see there, Hardened Scales, Module, just a lot of interactions there with Arcbound Worker, even Evolutionary Leap.
Evolutionary Leap is a really nice inclusion in this one, too, as a way to sacrifice a creature and just grab another. You know, the creatures in this deck are all fairly something that you'd want. You know, Old Affinity, you could draw into a Memnite or an Ornithopter, and sometimes that's a dead draw. But in this case, you know, maybe your worst get is the Arcbound Worker, which still has a lot of usability in this deck. It's going to be another Arcbound Worker. All right. They're getting it done. They're working together.
They're trying their best.
This is synergy, you know? All right, it looks like 2 mana play. I think we might be trying to lead into something here. It's going to be Snapcaster Mage, Snap Settle. No, it doesn't look. I don't think there was a Settle the Wreckage ever cast, so somehow all of these got out and available, but we're just going to be looking at a Path to Exile by the look of it. Matt Nass, he sees the writing on the wall. He's going to pick it up, and he's going to try and really consolidate his 30 minutes into Game 3.
Yeah, so right now, Matt Nass and Sam Pardee both need to win this third game if they want to win the match. On the left, if Luis or Gabby are able to win a game, they're going to be in solid position.
And now it is going to be a hollow one up against Expedition Map. By the look of it, we fired off a Faithless Looting as well as cycling 2 Street Wraiths, which is why we see Sam down to 16. A 4/4 was able to join the battlefield, which will likely be joined by both a Bloodghast and a Flamewake Phoenix next turn. Scratch that. Relic of Progenitus hits the battlefield, and now it is just a land and a 4/4, sweeping it up. Faithless Looting, gone. Flamewake Phoenix, gone. Bloodghast, gone. That was a lot of reusability that Sam was sitting on that is no longer there.
Yeah, a very nice Relic of Progenitus there from Gabby.
Faithless
Well-timed also. I think it's tempting to go for your map as fast as possible, but when there's that much power in the graveyard, it is wise to pop that Relic as soon as possible.
And now it's going to be this 4/4 trying to get the job done, but it's getting followed up by Faithless Looting, which might be able to rebuild up that graveyard, but it's just going to be 2 lands that jump in at the moment, plus a fetch. I wonder how many lands do you need to have in hand to really go for this?
Yeah, Sam may be drawing a few more lands than he would have liked to. One of the nice things about these Hollow One decks is that with cards like Faithless Looting, you're able to siphon through your deck and find the cards that aren't dead. So when you do draw too many lands, it's usually pretty easy to filter them out and find more action. Though you'd much rather, obviously, be discarding things like Flamewake Phoenix or Bloodghast.
And so with nothing but lands in the graveyard, Gabby's got to be feeling pretty good about her chances heading into this one. She set herself back somewhat by just not using that map, by really prioritizing the Relic. But it's a Flameblade Adept that hits the battlefield. It's the 1/2 for 1. It's got Menace, and it certainly feels that way once you've discarded a few cards. Goblin Lore in hand, joined by a Thoughtseize and a Lightning Bolt for Sam Pardee. He likes all 3 of those.
Oh, yeah. Potentially a very powerful turn on the next cycle for Sam.
Mm-hmm. Now, we haven't seen the land get played by Gabby just yet. Might be running through some of the options. You do have access to this Expedition map.
Yeah, Gabby may want to pop the map during her main phase so that she can play a particular piece of Tron on this turn, thus giving her the chance to have access to a ton of mana on the following turn. It may also be necessary for her to leave that mana open for some other type of card. She could have something like a Dismember or even a Spatial Contortion.
And it looks like we put down another tower. So Gabby, she plays another tower. That might have been the consideration. Do you pop the map and make sure that you have 2 out of the 3 pieces, or do you double up on one of them? But it's a Goblin Lore here from Sam Pardee. We're going to draw 4 cards. We're going to mix them all up, and we're going to throw 3 of them straight into the bin, pretending like we didn't even want them in the first place.
Yes.
Don't worry, there will be a chance to get them back. It is Flamewake Phoenix, Hollow One, and the Flameblade Adept. You know what that leaves? Lightning Bolt and Thoughtseize.
That's true. And I mean, Gabby pretty happy to have hit that Hollow One. Otherwise, that would have just came down onto the battlefield for free. Though, having a...
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, okay.
Swing,
Yeah.
Swing for 7 takes down the Hollow One. That's going to be gaining 4 life on Sam Pardee's side of things. But it is still a hit in for 4. Gabby Sparks is going to go down to 12. Sam left with another copy of Goblin Lore and an Ancient Grudge in hand right now. We're going to fire down this Expedition map, find another piece of Tron. We were able to save enough life to do so, but we are still a couple of turns away from being able to assemble it at soonest because we did double up on towers at one point.
Yeah, still that Nature's Claim super important there.
There's Ancient Stirrings from Gabby. There's a Ancient Grudge for Sam Pardee. He will have the ability to maybe interact if Gabby goes for something like an Expedition map and maybe another play or something like that. Doesn't leave up the mana to actually be able to interact with it. Could be disrupted somewhat by that. But really, Ancient Grudge, not as good against the top-end threats of this deck.
Yeah, things like Karn and Ugin and Ulamog, those are not cards you can deal with via Ancient Grudge. Ancient Grudge is really the kind of card that you want to use to take out something like an Expedition map that had been played on turn 1, thus preventing your opponent from really getting their mana going. Right now, Sam, he may try to get lucky with the Thoughtseize, hoping that Gabby only has 1 big spell on the following turn, and he may even just be forced to try to go all in on this Adept right now.
We're going to fire down this Chromatic Star, probably naming green would be my expectation. We do have an Oblivion Stone, some Worm Coils in there. We're going to draw a card, play down another relic. Oh, no. That would get rid of, again, the Faithless Looting and that new copy of Flamewake Phoenix. Do you fire it down now or do you be patient? I think this is kind of that situation. Historically, you used to always really try and hold on to it as long as you could. These days, when delve threats are around, when there's these creatures that are already in the graveyard, we're just going to go for it now. That does help and disable anything like a Gurmag Angler or a Tasigur that could be in play.
Yeah, it means that Sam, he has less options on the following turn.
Draws in. He's got Goblin Lore, Lightning Bolt. Not much to point the bolt at yet. Gabby is still at 12. Goblin Lore is going to draw us 4 cards. We're going to discard 3 of them at random. Let's try it again. Does still mean that we're going to be getting a swing in for 4, basically uncontested right now.
Yeah.
+1, +0, anytime you cycle or discard a card.
A very dangerous situation for Sam. Gabby potentially with the ability to produce 10 mana on the following turn.
Ancient Grudge and Thoughtseize hit the bin. So the Ancient Grudge no longer a secret, but still usable from the graveyard. Definitely one of the ones that you don't mind finding its way in there. It's going to be the attack in for 4, and it looks like we may not actually have a follow-up land to enable anything like the Lightning Bolt. It's back to Gabby, and if we are able to fully assemble Tron this turn, oh my. All right. It's time to see what we can come up with. It's Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. And at 8, do you go for the lands?
I think you go for 1 land and the Flameblade Adept.
Okay.
It's too dangerous because Sam could do something like double Faithless Looting, put you at 3 on the next turn, and then you're just dead to a Lightning Bolt on the following turn.
All right. So we do see a Faithless Looting here. That is going to draw 2 cards, pitch 2 cards. If he's able to find a land, he'll be able to deploy it. And now it is this Ulamog up against a Stomping Ground, though I very much suspect that Ulamog hungers for it.
Yes.
He's looking for new Stomping Grounds.
Hungers for everything. It's just ceaseless.
Hunger is evergreen, It's always been around. All right, we've got the decision in what to discard here, but if you're Sam, I'm really curious about at what consideration, are you thinking, all right, this is the card that I need to draw out of this situation?
Well, I think Sam now is looking for a pile of Lightning Bolts, right? What Sam wants to do is Sam wants to, have a land tier, cast a Lightning Bolt, put Gabby down to 5, have her not have a Karn or an additional copy of Ulamog, and then cast a pair of Lightning Bolts in the following turn.
That's best case scenario.
That's best case scenario, and that's, you need 3 Lightning Bolts and a land, so it's not easy for that to happen, but potentially it's a possibility.
We know about one of those Lightning Bolts so far, so really you just need the top 2 cards of your library to be Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
And, of course, the third one as well.
Yeah, well,
Or,
you need one red source. Yeah.
That seems pretty easy. All right, we're going to discard a Flamewake Phoenix. We're going to go ahead and fetch with this Wooded Foothills. That's going to find us a red source. That could mean that Lightning Bolt, and then all hope for Sam Pardee rests upon coming up with some sort of non-combat way and not exiling the top cards. Wouldn't it be a shame if Ulamog turned sideways and then we see the final 2 Lightning Bolts or whatever number was necessary get put into that exile pile?
Yeah, it would definitely mean that things were a little less interesting.
Well, let's hope not then. I'll always vote for more interesting. So it's actually Gurmag Angler that comes down to the battlefield. 1 Lightning Bolt in hand. I don't think we have 2 copies, but we do have a Bloodghast that could turn sideways with haste.
Yeah, so important to note, though, that Gurmag Angler, in conjunction with a single Lightning Bolt, is enough to end the game. So if Gabby does not have a way to get this Angler off the table, which does seem unlikely but is possible, then Sam on the following turn is threatening lethal.
Sometimes you just got to dream and hope for the best.
Yeah.
It's game 3. You can't just pick up your cards because this is it. If you can find a way out of it, you need to. Well, that's not promising. Oh, okay. So it's Wormcoil Engine hits the battlefield. Doubling up on these Now my only hope is to see the Oblivion Stone come down and see 4 of the 3/3s. Like, normally, you know, it's 1 that becomes 2. It's a worm harvest here.
It is a worm harvest. That's an accurate assessment.
Yeah, combat's not going to get it done. Sam Party extends the hand. Gabby sparts with 2 Wormcoil engines flanking this Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. That is going to be the win, joining Pat Cox with the match win, and that is going to somewhat nullify the final results of Matt Nass versus Luis Scott-Vargas here in round 5.
Yeah, and Gabby choosing to include multiple copies of Wormcoil Engine in her version of Tron. This is a card that we've seen some people moving away from, but really getting rewarded there. We've already seen her multiple times on camera deploy that card against these red-black or red-black X decks, where it really is the very best card you could possibly have.
Well, here in Detroit, we've got more teams battling it out. We're going to have the opportunity to see more of them right after this. I'm TJ Rogers. This is Jake Van Lunen, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to round 5 here at Grand Prix Detroit. TJ Rogers joined by Jake Van Lunen, and we've got more magic for you, as we always try to do. So let's head on down to it and see what we've got. And it is going to be Patrick Tierney up against Mike Sechrist. Gotta love this matchup. It looks like we are going to be going for a Street Wraith. It's more of this Hollow One bonanza. Now it looks like Patrick might be playing around with... Okay, this is actually going to be more Jeskai control. We saw it in the hands of Louis Scott-Vargas. It looks like Patrick Tierney has decided to emulate that. I'm going to actually just, just leave it up. Jeskai looks really solid right now.
Yeah, Jeskai tends to do better in the mirror, particularly because you have the ability to bolt, snap, bolt, and win games that way. Also with the prevalence of more Death Shadow decks coming back, the potential to just win games out of nowhere in that way is also important. Against one of these Hollow One style decks, it's probably not quite as strong, but just being a blue-white control deck in general with board sweepers and the post-board power you get means the matchup still is not bad for you.
And it's going to be the continuation of what we have seen throughout this day. Turn 1, Hollow One using the Street Wraith and the Faithless Looting, pitching a couple of lands. So not a whole lot that is recursive in this graveyard just yet. From Patrick, it is going to be a Serum Visions. And so far, Mike Sechrist, the only player at the table without that game win yet. So he's looking to even things up in this table. That there's a lot of decisive games happening right now.
Yeah, Mike Sechrist, one of the very best players in the world, as you see, in 13th place right now out of every living Magic player. Another thing I'd like to note is that the number of Hollow Ones we've seen on turn 1 this weekend seems much higher than I'm used to.
Yeah, it's been happening. So we're going to go ahead and discard a Bloodghast. We've got one more card to discard, and it might just be a land, but we are going to have our land play for the turn. That's going to bring back one of these. We're going to get the attack in for 4 likely, but first things first, let's throw down a Tasigur. That's going to leave us with just the 2 Faithless Lootings in there to be recycled later. An attack for 4. Patrick is going to go down to 14. He shocked himself previously with that Steam Vents. He's going to untap and hope for the best. This deck, he does not have the same capacity to hope for a Terminus, but he does have 2 copies of Supreme Verdict and 1 copy of Wrath of God.
It's, it may not be fast enough. It looks to me like Mike Sechrist is poised to have enough power on the table to win this game before Patrick Tierney ever plays a 4th land. Unless, of course, Patrick Tierney has additional interaction to play on this and the coming turn.
He's got 1 Path to Exile in hand right now. So he'll likely end up fetching for that one. Might go for a basic to keep his life total at sort of 13 beforehand. He'd be able to Path to Exile this Hollow One. He would still end up taking 6. So his base level right now is 8. Minus the fetch, and then minus if he shocks himself, he could be going down to 5 at the end of this combat. Looks like we're going to keep our life total at 7.
And 7, a very important difference from 5 here with Mike Sechrist representing 6 points of power on the table right now.
Yeah, the 4/5 and the Bloodghast means that Mike Sechrist would need to develop more pressure or maybe something like a Lightning Bolt to at least make it to where it's next turn lethal. Finding a basic Swamp off of that Path to Exile. And actually, he does have that Lightning Bolt in hand.
Yeah, so Mike Sechrist with the tools he needs to win this game. Deciding whether or not he wants to fire off Burning Inquiry, decides not to.
For Patrick, taking a look at this hand, and from what I can tell, a lot is going to rely on this. The problem is that even his board wipes, he doesn't have the time right now to actually be able to survive that. 3 mana isn't going to do it. So he's really looking for any sort of interaction that can keep him alive through this. Maybe a Path to Exile where he can go land, search for his concept, Path to Exile, and really start trying to get this engine going. Here's the draw step. It's going to be a big one. It's a Cryptic Command that he cannot cast just yet, but he doesn't know about the Lightning Bolt. He does still have a chance. It's Search for Azcanta. The shields are down, and Mike Sechrist is likely going to capitalize this and make it full even across the table. Lightning Bolt, Tasigur, and Bloodghast able to deal that final point of damage. Cycling the Street Wraith too. Always be ready, Flashback, Faithless Looting.
You want to do as much stuff as you could possibly do before winning, right?
I mean, I always do, yeah. There it is. There's the Lightning Bolt, and that is going to bring us into a Game 3. So we have got game wins for every player, but none of them have been able to double up on it just yet. Let's go ahead and take a look at Eric Froelich up against Evan Nelson, and it appears that we have got humans up against Tron, a deck that has been really a dominant force today.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of Tron. I think that may come as a surprise to a lot of the people watching. In Modern right now, Quark Clan Ironworks, the combo strategy, a lot of people believe it to be one of the best possible decks you could play, and it's impossible to play Tron and Quark Clan Ironworks in the same team. So people really had to make a big decision of whether or not they wanted to play Tron or KCI. And it seems like many more people than we may have initially expected chose to play Tron when given that decision.
Yep, and we do have now Tron assembled for Eric Froelich. Also has Sanctum of Ugin. This is a card that I have really enjoyed. It has started sort of filling the role that used to be filled, if you remember it, by Eye of Ugin.
Yeah, Eye of Ugin made Tron basically a 90-10 matchup for the Tron player against control decks. Now it's not quite that bad, but Sanctum of Ugin still acting as a tutor for Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger or some other terrifying thing in the later stages of the game.
All right, we've got Tron assembled. We might be looking to fire down a Karn. We might be looking, not certain quite what we have in hand. I think we might be near an Ulamog in hand, actually. It's going to be Chromatic Sphere that comes down to the battlefield. Looks like we're going to activate this one. No interest in deploying the Karn that is in hand.
Still, the mana to cast that Karn available right now.
And it's going to be Thragtusk instead, gaining 5 life, putting down the 5/3. This is going to put Eric Froelich back up to 14. He was under a bit of pressure, following it up with a Chromatic Star and an Expedition map. Quite a bit of mana available to him next turn. He could, let's see, if he draws, I guess, any one of his Tron lands, he'd be able to cast Ulamog next turn.
Yeah, and additionally, even if Evan is able to deal with the Tron that Eric has currently assembled, the Expedition map means that Eric can put that back together very quickly, though Humans rarely has anyone interact with that.
No. It's going to be Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. We have got a little bit of mana in hand, and actually, I like this inclusion. Does that look like a... Yeah, there's a Hostage Taker in this build of Humans. That's going to come down and eliminate the Thragtusk. I like this quite a bit. That means that next turn, we could see Evan end up casting this Thragtusk from underneath. This Hostage Taker, gain 5 life, get the nice attacker in. Now, it is Thragtusk whenever it leaves the battlefield, not whenever it dies. So that does mean that a 3/3 beast is going to jump into the fray.
Yeah, and this is also a very risky play from Evan, because if Eric does have some way to get that Hostage Taker off the table on the following turn, Evan could find himself facing off against a brand new Thragtusk that is gaining Eric a brand new 5 life and threatening to create a brand new 3/3 beast.
Yeah, that Karn normally not that great against a go wide strategy like this, but now suddenly, playing down the Karn, you get to kill the Hostage Taker and gain 5 life and make a 5/3.
That's a deal.
It's a bargain at twice the price. Maybe. I'm not certain if I'd pay it. All right, Chromatic Star, Expedition map, and a beast lining up against Hostage Taker. Phantasmal Image, which I believe is Thalia's Lieutenant. And a Champion of the Parish with 3 counters on it. So it's a 4/4, a 2/2, joining that Hostage Taker. We've got Walking Ballista in hand that could eliminate the Phantasmal Image. It doesn't matter how much its power and toughness is. It's only if it's targeted by a spell or ability that it would have to sacrifice. We're going to activate this Chromatic Star, 2 mana floating at the moment.
Yeah, now that means that Eric could potentially use Walking Ballista and cast it for... He's not going to do that now that he sacrificed this map, but he could use a Walking Ballista to deal with both the Image and the Hostage Taker and create a new Thragtusk. And considering he's not doing that, that means that whatever he does this turn is going to be absurd.
I'll take the better play, thank you. All right. So it's going to be another copy of that tower, and I think we might be looking at the Karn to get back the Thragtusk. and just trying to continue, because doing the play this way means that you now have the mana to next turn fire down this Ulamog as well. Now that you've got access to these 2 towers. It's going to be another 5 life. Eric Froelich is going to jump up to 15, which is such a pleasant place compared to the 5 that he would have been otherwise. Walking Ballista comes down to the battlefield with just a singular counter on it. And now times are looking pretty difficult for Evan Nelson. All of these games are deciding. These players need to, they cannot pull any punches when it comes down to this. Every win is going to count.
Yeah, now Eric, not looking to save that Walking Ballista, even though it could be potentially much, much stronger on a following turn, realizes that on this turn, if he has a blocker plus a way to deal with that image, in addition to these Thragtusk, that it means there's basically no way he dies on this turn. On the following turn, he knows that he's going to be casting Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, barring something like a Meddling Mage happening. And the Walking Ballista could even deal with that over the course of some number of turns.
So it's Thalia, but if we get aggressive, Walking Ballista can just jump in front of the champion and then poke the Phantasmal Image. And that is going to be the attack. You do also have access to the Thragtusk and the Beast. Looks like we're going to throw that Thragtusk in front of the Phantasmal Image. Might be looking to realign those blocks somewhat. That Walking Ballista is able to really cleanly answer that one. Then it's, do you want to set yourself up to eliminate the Phantasmal Image? Or, I'm sorry, the Champion of the Parish, or just let that one exist? Looks like that's what we're okay with. We'll kill the Phantasmal Image, take no damage. The Thragtusk remains, and it is going to be Eric Froelich untapping, and he is looking to make some big waves this turn.
Yeah, not only will Eric be able to cast Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger this turn, but he will also be able to use that trigger from Sanctum of Ugin, search his library for another gigantic threat, and it looks like he even has an Ugin the Spirit Dragon in hand if he wanted to do that instead.
I'm really hoping that the answer becomes Emrakul. I just like it when there's 2 of these there. And it looks like we've decided, all right, let's jump on over to another one. That is going to be a win for Eric. A handshake. Ben Stark up against Tyler Markland, and we are diving into what appears to be Hardened Scales with a little bit of this Yavimaya Coast, which has just been a slight splash consideration for Psy Master Thopterist, I would imagine, if that is in the deck. Otherwise, you've got blue, maybe going for some negates, anything like that out of the sideboard.
Yeah, things like Spell Pierce. Seems like Trinket Mage is making an appearance here on the sideboard. And Trinket Mage seems like it could be very good in this deck, searching out things like Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, any number of other inexpensive and powerful artifacts.
All right, so no Psy Master Thopterist in that one. I was probably thinking of KCI when I was thinking of the Yavimaya Coast. On the other side, it is Jeskai Control. We have got Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, with 5 counters, trying to hold back this onslaught of 6 Thopters, an Arcbound Ravager with 1 counter, an Arcbound Worker with 1 counter, and that Walking Ballista with, you guessed it, 1 counter. There's an Inkmoth Nexus on the battlefield as well, so if Ben Stark ends up tapping out for any reason, there is just as much capacity to throw 10 counters onto the Inkmoth Nexus as throw a pile of counters onto this Walking Ballista. This board on the right side, very, very fluid right now and versatile.
Yeah, Ben Stark needs some type of board sweeping effect, but even if he finds it, you're right. Things are looking very, very dangerous for him at this point.
We're going to untap, settle the wreckage.
Could be good.
Could be good. All right, 7 mana currently available with that Mox Opal. One of them is the Inkmoth Nexus. Not a whole lot as far as you could just throw some mana into the Walking Ballista if you so chose. But with 2 cards in hand, might be looking just to try and continue developing.
And that Inkmoth also representing lethal right now.
Bit of a bold play in the face of 8 untapped mana. But certainly an option. You never know. Sometimes you just got to go for it. Live the dream. It's going to be an attack in for 8. We're keeping back the Arcbound Ravager as well as the Walking Ballista. This looks like a play around Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, now even if Ben Stark did have the copy of Settle the Wreckage, it would mean that Tyler would be able to sacrifice all of these things he's attacking with, put a ton of counters on this Arcbound Ravager, and then if Ben Stark had an answer for the Ravager, he could dump all of those counters onto the Walking Ballista and be presenting a lethal attack on the following turn.
All right, well, Ben needs an answer, and he needs it now. He's taking a look at these attackers, what he could do. We did not see anything like a Cryptic Command stop this before combat. There was the potential of something like a, Snapcaster Cryptic. He does have a Wear and Tear in hand. He might be considering how he could best use that one. There's currently no enchantments to target, but he could be deciding what artifact creature would be best. If he were to start targeting something like the Arcbound Ravager, then there would be a lot of potential for him to combine that with Settle the Wreckage.
So Ben Stark going to force Tyler to make a decision there with the Wear Tear as he targets Arcbound Ravager. Now, Tyler, could dump a lot of resources into this, put all of those counters onto his Walking Ballista, could also just let this happen. A lot of different decisions here.
Throw a counter onto the Walking Ballista, just let it be a 2-2. Looks like we're going to sacrifice this Mox Opal. We no longer need it. We've got 6 mana anyway. That's up to being a 2-2. There's a copy of what appears to be a Spell Pierce in the hand of Tyler Markland, though at this point that has certainly lost a lot of its usability against the many lands of Ben Stark. All right, up to 3 counters, getting rid of that Darksteel Citadel as well. It is still the Thopters, and the Arcbound Worker might be considering throwing those counters onto the Arcbound Worker as well.
Yeah, if you put them onto the Arcbound Worker, then that would allow you to attack for more damage right now, front load your ability to win. I like this play a lot from Tyler, though. What he wants to do here is he wants to put a whole bunch of counters onto this Inkmoth Nexus and set himself up to have an additional route to victory if he needs it.
So that Arcbound Ravager up to 4 counters currently. That Inkmoth Nexus now active. How we saw that happen is Arcbound Ravager used its ability to sacrifice the Arcbound Worker, getting a +1/+1 counter for itself. And then the modular of the Arcbound Worker put its +1/+1 counter onto the Inkmoth Nexus. So now we're pointing 4 of these +1/+1 counters towards the Walking Ballista, and it looks like we might see a Path to Exile in response. That means that it will be only the 1 damage that can be used, or you could go for a basic land if you feel like it.
Yeah, so now Tyler has to choose between...
Going to pay the 4 mana to put an additional +1/+1 counter on it, then use both of them, knock Ben Stark down to 16. Still 5 mana available. Still 6 Thopters attacking in. There's a Snapcaster in hand, as well as a Lightning Helix. Might be considering taking down the Inkmoth Nexus. All right, so Inkmoth now off the battlefield, and Ben is going to gain 3 life, making this an attack for 3. Tyler Markland still, he's got a field of Thopters, but his board just does not look nearly as commanding as it did at the start of his turn. He's lost both the Walking Ballista and the Arcbound Ravager and the Inkmoth Nexus. Those were really the big 3 of his board. Yeah,
and Ben Stark just had it all there. We saw a Path to Exile, and a Lightning Helix all deployed in that very same turn. And, Tyler, he still has a wide table. If he's able to dodge something like a Supreme Verdict or a Settle the Wreckage, he's still in a very good position to win this game.
Looks like we're heading into combat, and this will be a Snapcaster Cryptic Command, tap down the team, and I imagine draw a card. Maybe bring back your Snapcaster if you feel so bold.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the bounce Snapcaster play, depending on what's in the graveyard, could be stronger. You might rather have a Snapcaster in your hand than a random card at the top of your library.
And it looks like that is what he's going to decide with Path to Exile, Lightning Helix, and Wear and Tear. In the graveyard, it means that he's got quite a few options. Ooh, Ceremonial. Oh, no.
Yeah, Ceremonious Rejection, very strong there. Oh, wow.
But Spell Pierce able to answer that, so Ceremonious Rejection targets the Arcbound Ravager. The Spell Pierce gets its time in the sun, answers that card, and now the Arcbound Ravager gets to stay. But now Tyler Markland empty-handed. Ben Stark could try and put together something with Wear and Tear to try and eliminate some of these, but he's at 13. There's 7 power on the board, and the draws are pretty live right now. Like so. Snap Wear Tear.
Yeah, we know that Ben Stark has the Wear Tear in hand, and Wear Tear
Or the Snapcaster in hand.
has the Snapcaster in hand, which can then target the Wear and Tear that's in the graveyard. This means that Ben Stark will be able to not only deal with one of these artifacts, but also get the Hardened Skulls off the table.
The only problem there is that you would still have access to getting that effect while it's on the stack. And so for each sacrifice of a Thopter, you would get 2 counters. And then eventually, when you sacrifice the Arcbound Ravager, you'll also get that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is actually an attack for lethal if it's Snap Wear Tear and there's no other interaction. It would be an exact hit for 13, and that's without sacrificing the Mox Opal. So you'd probably see that as well and maybe keep one of the Thopters.
Yeah, so this is because you need to keep one Thopter so that it's still attacking, so it presents that lethal damage. And yeah, each of these represents another 2 counters on this Ravager when the Ravager itself.
Oh, that's a big hit. Kozilek's Return, 2 damage to each creature. It's a colorless instant, and that is going to sweep this field. You combine that with the known Wear Tear in hand, there is no getting out of this for Tyler Markland, and he knows about that Snapcaster in hand. He knows the kind of inevitability that he is facing. Still enough mana to play that Snapcaster and eliminate both the Hardened Scales and whatever artifact creature is remaining.
Yeah, so Tyler going to put enough counters onto this Arcbound Ravager to make sure it stays alive, but then we know that Snapcaster plus Wear Tear will clean up the table.
Oh, and look at that. We actually just saw Mike Sechrist actually check the final box required at the bottom of this too. Ben Stark in a really commanding position, and it looks like Eric Froelich and Mike Sechrist also taking away the 2 game wins that were required. That means that the left side of the battlefield is going to come away with the match win here in this round.
Yeah, really exciting there. Kozilek's Return is a card we've been seeing popping up a little bit. The fact that it's an instant really makes it a very powerful board sweeper. It also is a colorless card, technically, so it deals with things like Etch Champion. Just a card that has gotten a little bit more popular as of late, and we just saw why.
All right, well, that is going to do it here for round 5 at Grand Prix Detroit. Riley has made his way into the venue. He is going to be lining up to jump into the booth, so I will be saying farewell along with Jake Van Lunen for now. But stick around, there is round 6 coming up.